on and hand over to Petra. Thank you.
Thank you. So welcome everybody. It's nice to have you all here. Today we're hoping to have more chats, either with you wanting to talk with your camera on or off, to all of us, or probably more likely chatting in the chat function itself. And we're going to do some sort of dilemmas and ideas about what happens around misconduct. But first of all, we've done our welcomes, we've done our introductions. We're going to go back over the week. We're going to have a chat together. And then obviously at the end, there's a feedback survey. Although that's our plan for today, if there's anything else you'd like to talk about, that you've got questions, or perhaps that has come up for you while you've been learning, please do put that in the chat, and we will come back to it. So one of the things I wanted to begin with was thinking back to when we started this course. You learned about examples of good practice in research and unethical conduct. And there was quite a lot of examples that we shared with you that were about really unethical practices across a different way of working. So I think before we go any further, can you put in the chat something you're going to use in your own work based on good practice that you've learnt about? So, for example, one of the things we talked about was the heart and soul at the hub was one of our examples you'll have seen in the course. That's a project that's run out of the UK where disabled people created their own survey. And I often use that in my own practice because I found that not only did they ask the question in written form, but they have an audio you could listen to or a video and an easy read sort of photo guide, so that when you're running a survey, if people have got different access points, they can click on different ways of interpreting the question, and you could use that with different languages as well. So for me, that would be a good thing I've learned about good practice. So something like that to put in the chat of a good thing you've learned. And I think something that made an impact on you about unethical research that you'll work hard to avoid. I think for me, having written the course that you've been studying and selecting those examples, the thing I'm really keen still to avoid is pain. That could be emotional pain or psychological pain or physical pain or harms later on. And I'm very mindful of that when we're learning about these things, that it can be really difficult for us. But equally, it's about avoiding everyday bad practice. So that's an example of how you might want to answer that question. We're going to do that first, and then we're going to move on to do some case study examples of plagiarism, fabrication, and what to do to avoid it if we see other people doing it. And then we're going to try and think about how we create a really good, strong research culture for ourselves and other people. So first, if you want to pop in the chat, and perhaps Ssentongo can read some of them out, of what have been good and bad examples that we're going to do or avoid, please.
Yeah, thank you, Petra. Yeah, so we can do that and put some of the examples uh, in the chat box.
I like that Laura picked out the example of people being able to choose their anonymized names. Um, I've done a piece of research that was around bereavement, and when people chose their anonymized names, they often chose the name of the person that they were talking about, that they'd lost, the person that they'd been bereaved from. And so they felt that when that was written up as a piece of research, their person stayed with them because it had become like a memory for them. So sometimes that anonymized name can have an awful lot of meaning attached to it. So that some people really like to do that. It's not their name, but they know when they read it, it's a special name for them. Maybe other people have got some examples of good practice they've taken from the course, or what they are definitely trying not to do in their own practice. Ssentongo, what good practice would you say you've learned through studying ethics that you try and do routinely?
Yeah, well, one of the best things and one of the cornerstones in research in ethics is informed consent.
Mm,
So that process, so whereby I first disseminate the information to the potential participants, tell them what is entailed in the study, and then later on, I comprehensively explain that and get their voluntary response, either to reject or to accept to join the study. So that to me has really been important, and that's why I've also conducted some research in that line of the informed consent process. Uh, so it has been one of my good practices.
yeah, that's so
So
important.
so you could as well tell us your best practice in ethics that you ever given us. Yeah.
Oh, I will, but Grace has
Yeah.
jumped in with it. Fantastic. Thanks for starting us off, Grace. Let's see. Grace says, I will work on identifying ethical issues that will potentially affect the researcher. Yeah, that's a really good point. And I think that came up last week, didn't it? That we were saying that that's not really something that's covered as much as it should be. So, yeah, Grace, if you wanted to share how you might do that, please add something else. And maybe other people have got some things that they've learned that they will practice afterwards, or things that we know to avoid. I'm thinking about my good practice now, Ssentongo, since you challenged me with a question. Um, one of the things I learned as a good practice, and this is a really obvious thing, is making sure the research is what the people I'm researching want rather than just what I would like. Sometimes that isn't the way you design a study, but most of the work I do is with children and young people and it's participatory. So just because I want to know something doesn't mean that that's their priority or the best way that they do it. And I've been reading this week something that I think I'll share in our forum later about something called an ethics tree, where you have a model tree and you hang your ethics questions on it. And I think that the idea of us expanding the way we do research from forms to verbal communication, consent or assent through craft or drawing or exchange, even making things into a game, is really helpful. Like an ethics game is quite good. Oh, Ssentongo, here, you can take this one. We've got another one.
Yeah. Baluko Innocent Muke has also posted. I said the ethical practice that I've always done is the question of confidentiality that I always give to the clients, that I will respect the information, not to share it to anyone apart from the central team for decisions making. Yeah, this is really a very nice thing to do. Confidentiality. Yeah, thank you, Innocent. So
A really good piece of advice somebody gave me when I first started research was that to think about how would you feel on the other side. So not you as the researcher, but how would you feel as the participant, or how would you feel if that was a relative or a friend of yours, a parent or a grandparent or a child or a cousin, how would you feel if these questions or this study was being offered to them? Do you think they'd like it? Do you think it would be okay? And that sometimes helps, particularly when we're thinking around communities that might be exploited, that actually if you don't want to do that research yourself, or if you wouldn't want your children to be in that research, or your nieces or nephews or your neighbours, then it's likely that nobody else would probably want to do that research as well. Oh, here we go. Ssentongo, you can do another one.
yeah, so Elunes has said that the ethical practice that I've done before is on patient data confidentiality by the use
Mm.
of anonymous names to identify participants. yeah, this is really a very nice practice, and I'm happy about the fact that people understand what confidentiality is and have really been practicing it well. Yeah. So Laura has also given us something here. Thank you, Laura. In the
Mm.
gender responsive research course, we speak about safety briefly, and one idea that stuck with me is to have a dummy questionnaire if there are gatekeepers who prevent access to people which might be unsafe. Yeah, thank you so much, Laura. Yeah, you looked into it. And then we also have Florence. I said that making research process participatory, eagerly letting the study site leaders participate in the sampling of facilities, schools, villages, so we can use the research findings to address real community issues faced in the study site. Yeah, thank you so much, Florence, because this is actually part of the community engagement process whereby you empower the community to actually give you the real thing. Yeah, thank you.
I was going to add to that as well. Something that I think's come out really strongly from all your answers is when you're doing the research, obviously you're writing up your project or you'll be describing your work or publishing your work or maybe going to a conference with it. But some of this process is actually as interesting, either as learning for the rest of us or your own teaching or mentoring. And quite a lot of people you'd think would know how to do this stuff, but they don't. So we're told to act ethically, but the doing of it is quite difficult. So I think something like you've described there, Florence, where you're saying about I'm going to involve the study site leaders and we're going to actually work together. I'd really want to know how did you do that and what happened and were there any barriers, what did you learn? So I think in terms of your own publications and developments, as long as you've thought about this within your ethical practice overall, the process and the journey is often as interest. And Tarek's added here the focus on potential available respondents through non-probability sampling methodology. Yeah. Yeah, so having, who could be there. And maybe part of that with ethics as well is what's everybody's need. So if we're thinking about who could be in our study, I think we talk a lot about who would we bring in or leave out, but who could we include and how would we reach them and how would we make that interesting? We could probably talk about this all day, so do feel free to keep adding into the chat if you want to, but we could move on to the next bit, Laura. We've now got a little bit of a challenge to go through. But before that, I'm just going to say that we had some questions from last time. One of them was about that following ethics isn't actually going to be helping their research, as in you're doing everything right, but the participants are not particularly willing. Ssentongo, I'll let you answer that one because I know you actually already dealt with it in the forum. So if people wanted to see that full question and Ssentongo's amazing answer, go and have a look. But Ssentongo, I didn't know if you wanted to add anything else to this part.
Yeah. Well, someone asked the question in the forum that what happens when someone finds out that following these ethics won't yield any fruits from their research? Because you have your mindset as a researcher, but there are some guidelines, the ethics that you'll need to follow. So therefore, if you have to conduct ethical research, then you can try to adjust your methodology, your research question to fit in so that you don't go astray. So therefore, if you find out that your questions or your research is not so you won't benefit from the ethics, so you have to alter something, and because this is what Petra will talk about later on, when we have falsification, fabrication, data fabrication, etc. Because this comes in when a researcher feels like they want to add in something that actually is not in line. So, and then the second question is that which of these of the research codes have subjective interpretation according to the research setting and contexts. So different research codes bring this out, the subjective interpretation according to the research setting and context. So those research codes which rely on the ethical pillars in research ethics are the ones that we rely on. So we talked about some of the pillars, such as informed consent, which comes in from the respect of research participants, beneficence, and the research giving us significance, contributing to the scientific rigor or the social value. So those codes that have the core foundations of research ethics are the ones that answer your question. So most ethical codes focus primarily on human and animal ethics, within which ethical frameworks or codes is engineering and technology addressed. So here I told you that we have lots of codes in engineering. So we have the national codes, we have institutional codes, and international codes. So all these codes regulate the engineering fraternity. So therefore, you will have to now, like in USA. So we have the National Social Society of Professional Engineers, codes of ethics. So in the UK, there are also some codes in engineering councils, UK standard for professional engineering competence. Then the Royal Academy of Engineering statements on ethics. And then I also shared some codes from the Ugandan side. So therefore, there are institutional, international, and national codes. Yeah, thank you.
Thanks, Ssentongo. That's really, really helpful. And I think the middle one about the research codes having subjective interpretations, we're going to find out about that next, because it's true that there are these specific codes that we do need to follow, and there are regulatory reasons why we have to do that. But we're not really doing this just to stop bad stuff happening or to not do bad stuff. We're actually using ethics every day to do good work, to be good to ourselves, to the environment, to one another, to our communities. And when we're talking about this here, or we're reading codes, or we're thinking about it in an abstract way, it feels quite easy. But when you're actually faced with it in a real life dilemma, it's actually a bit harder. So that's the part we're going to do next, if that's all right, Laura. So we're going to give you 4 scenarios, 2 on this slide, 2 on the next slide, and then a final one, which is actually a question that you all asked as a group that we're going to follow. What I would like you to do is I'm going to read each one of these to you. I'll do this slide, and then Ssentongo will do the next one. And I want you to say whether you think this is misconduct, and if so, what kind of misconduct it might be, and what would you do if you were in this situation. So let's start with the first example. Jamila is working in a team conducting a census across local villages. In this project, data is recorded on a standard paper form. So researchers are going out in a team, they're going to different places, and they'll have census information they have to record from different households on a paper form. Later, they bring that back and they enter the data onto a computer. Now, Jamila has noticed that her colleague Lebna is coming back with blank data sheets. So they're not filling it in when they're talking to people in their homes, in the villages. But nevertheless, Lebna is typing away, putting scores into the computer. And Jamila is a bit concerned about this. They say, okay, what's going on? And Lebna says, oh, well, when I'm talking to people, I remember what they've said. So I just listen and I remember everything. And then I come back and I write down the answers on the computer. Jamila is a bit suspicious, though. They think that Lebna hasn't spoken to anyone at all. So he might have been going out and doing the visits. He might not have even been doing that. But he certainly hasn't talked to people and written things down. So if you could put in the chat, what do you think has happened here? Do you think A, it's misconduct? And if you think it's misconduct, what kind of misconduct might it be? If you're not sure of this, it's fine to say I don't know, but those of you who've been working through the online course will know we've covered some of these examples. So your two questions are, is it misconduct? And if so, what kind? And as Laura has prompted us, if you were Jamila, what would you do? While you're recording, Ssentongo, have you ever experienced something like this?
Yeah, no, no, I've never experienced something like this. So we can uh, have you ever experienced it either?
Something like it, yeah. Yeah. I had a colleague who was doing qualitative interviews in a health project, and they didn't make any notes or recordings when they were with people. They would come and write about it afterwards or record themselves. And they said they didn't want to interrupt the interaction by getting out a tape recorder or writing it down, but they were relying entirely from memory. So it was similar, and I think we would do stuff. So Laura's thought was that they immediately thought Lebner would be secretly recording and using AI to transcribe the conversations without consent. That's an interesting one. Yeah, that's a possibility. I don't know what other people feel. Do they think that, is it okay for Lebner to go out and do these visits, but not write down what people say, but remember it or what he thinks it is later, and then put it into the database? Or would that be misconduct? So Florence says yes, it is misconduct, and they would report it to the principal investigator. And they said that Lebner is forging the data. Yes. We should, do you know what we should have done today, really? I should have had some prizes for this, for people getting the right answers. I feel like we need an a rising scholar's pen to be to be sent out to the winner. Um, you are correct. It is fabrication. Does anyone want to have a go and say why it's fabrication? Unless we decide to put Ssentongo on the spot, who can tell us why it's fabrication. Yeah. Tariq also says it's misconduct. Yeah. And yeah. So why is it fabrication? It's definitely misconduct. In fact, to be honest with you, as a clue for all of these things, you're going to see they are all misconduct, but it's what kind that we're interested in. So what's Lebner done that means that it's fabrication? He's gone out. Well, we think he's gone out. We're not entirely sure he's gone out, but we certainly do know he's come back to work without completed data forms, but he's entering data onto a computer. So what's that in terms of fabrication?
So I think
Perfect. Yeah, it's fabrication because we don't have evidence of how the data was collected. Perfect. Yeah, that's exactly it. And we suspect he's making it up. So that is fabrication. So poor Jamila, I think that could be, when we're thinking about everyday ethics, Lebna might not be particularly friendly. Jamila might not get on with him, but Jamila could be a really good friend in their team. Jamila could be, related to Lebna. They might be live near each other. They might be that Lebna's actually senior to Jamila. All of those dynamics will make a difference to how Jamila might feel about whether they could report it, whether there might be consequences. So although we can identify its misconduct, whether we do something about it will also depend on the infrastructure around us. So let's have another go. Chisomo is working on a pharmaceutical trial to test a new drug. And the analysis has come back and it really seems to suggest that the drug isn't any better than existing treatment. So, it's okay, but the pharmaceutical company obviously would like it to look like this drug is better than existing treatment. So Chisomo's boss has asked him to go back into the data set and change the data to make the drug seem more effective. And the reason for that is that Chisomo's boss wants to keep the funder happy. So I think we're all agreed that's misconduct. What kind of misconduct might that be? And also, what would you do if you were Chisomo? Because that's a lot of pressure on you. And let me have a look. Ssentongo, do you want to have a go at the comments? Well, my internet's a bit slow today, sorry.
All right. Yeah. Kenin is saying, let's start with Laura. Laura is saying that this is misconduct. So what type? Then what would you do? So that's the question you're answering. And Keneni is saying that that's falsification. Oh, yeah, we've got, thumbs up. Petra has given you a thumbs
Find
up.
my emoji.
Thank you. Yeah. So it deserves a pen. So we also have Elunes is saying that they agree. Yeah, this is really data falsification. So could you tell us? So what would you do? So what would you do?
I mean, I think this is an interesting one, isn't it? Because if you can see again why the pressure and the everyday ethics starts to sort of make a difference in that. I think we'd all like to say, well, we're not going to do that. But then when you've got your department and maybe your colleagues, everybody's income is dependent on getting research money in. And also there's a reputational thing, it's good publicity, you've got this money, you've got this connection. You want to keep your funder happy because you want them to give you more money for future research. But at what cost? I suppose the way to answer this question is what would you do if you were Chisomo, but maybe also to think about what would happen either way. So he's got a dilemma here. If he turns around and says, no, I'm not going to do that, that's the right thing to do. But what might happen? He could lose his job. He might get bullied at work. His boss might do it anyway. But if he does do it, potentially that's got an awful lot more implications further down the line. If they start saying this drug is better and it's actually no better, it could influence all sorts of things in terms of future treatment and care. So what tips have we got? Ssentongo, do you want to do that?
Yeah, so we are seeing lots of responses. So we are seeing Baluko Innocent is saying that I think the best thing to do is to report him to the national regulatory authorities of drugs because what he's doing is poison. So Baluko, you can also think about what would happen to this research at Somo if at all they reported that person to the regulatory authorities. So we also have Elunes Mskua is saying that's falsification. Yes, that's true. Thank you. I would not bend to what the pharmacist is requesting because this will clearly cause harm to those who would consume the drug. But you're right, Petra. This situation is very tricky for Kisomo. Yeah, so I think here Elunes is having a consequentialist thought. So you think about the greater good for for the greater population. So if at all you adhered to the pharmacist, the request of the funder, but you're going to do more harm to the general population. So we also have Tina, should be reported to the REC representative whose contact is in the consent form or research documents, of course, someone higher than PI. So Tina is saying that they could report the case to REC. And also Tina is saying that it is a legal case in research ethics and also safety and harm for humanity.
That was
Yeah.
great. I'm interested. I wonder whether if we'd have tried this exercise a couple of weeks ago, whether we'd have been able to do it as confidently as today. But either way, it's really, really good to see the sort of thinking and the critical attention here that you've got. Right, we'll give you two more, well, three more, actually, three more goes. So, Ssentongo, you can take the next two.
Yeah, well, thank you. So we have another question. So is this misconduct? So part two. Kamara is the chair of a charity that gives grants to researchers. The treasurer alerts Kamara to a missing project progress report on investigation. Kamara discovers the grant holder is nowhere to be found, nor is there any evidence of work being completed. So we want to know, is this really misconduct? If it is misconduct or not, what would you do? So we are seeing that Kamara is the chair of the charity that gives grants to these researchers. So the treasurer alerts him, Kamara, to a missing project progress report. On investigation, Kamara discovers the grant holder is nowhere to be found, nor is there any evidence of work being completed. So what is this? So I'm seeing in the chat we are seeing Florence, I think, responding to the other question. Oh, this one. I would talk to my boss about the study ethics and the implication of his idea to the community. Yeah. So Florence, I think, is responding to the previous question. So that is really interesting that they would tell the boss about the study ethics and the implications of the idea. So right now we are now trying to analyze this. Is this research misconduct? Is this misconduct the Kamara's case? So we are waiting for you in the chat. Yeah, thank you so much.
Thank you. Have you ever encountered something like this, Ssentongo? Or you, Laura? Has anybody actually encountered something that's happened like this?
Uh, like me, I've never encountered something like this, though I hear about it. Yeah, so as I'm responding, I'm seeing someone giving us a response. Tariq. Tariq is saying that yes, it is a misconduct. Try to find the owner of the grant and transfer to other responsible person.
Mm.
Yeah, so yeah, thank you, Laura. Uh, Laura has given us a link to the recap of the types of misconduct, and she's showing us that they're here in that link. So, so we want to know which type of misconduct. So Tariq has told us that yes, it is misconduct.
I think while people are thinking about this one, you mentioned, I think, a couple of weeks ago, Ssentongo, that there's the issue of there's ethics and there's sort of protection and risk and harm and safeguarding, but there are certain aspects around legal issues within countries that sort of are overarching around ethics. And I think in this case, I think we've got several of you now saying, yes, it's fraud. Yes, it's fraud. It is absolute fraud, but it's also theft, theoretically, because, you know, we're basically finding someone's taken the money fraudulently. It's not for us to suddenly go around being a detective and trying to find out where it went, although we probably should make inquiries. But some of these situations are not just ethical questions, they become part of wider concerns within your country's laws. So in this case, I would say that it is about reporting fraud, but it's also probably alerting the authorities outside of your institution for advice. It depends who you're working as well. So I don't know how many of us on the call work for charities. I do. That if this happened within that context, it's not just a research issue. There are various charitable boards that I would have to report to as well. So in this case, because it's a charity, she's not just got the research part of the issue to attend to. She will have wider regulatory issues that she'll have to report into in terms of a charity commission and things like that. And it's misuse of power as well. And give this job to somebody else. Yes, I think that's a really practical consideration as well. That if you've got the project's been held up because obviously somebody's not done the work, but yes, you need to give the job to somebody else to keep going with it. Shall we do the last two questions quickly? Because I'm aware actually we've been chatting so nicely. We're coming up to the end of our hour. So Ssentongo, do you want to do the next one and then we'll jump to the last one quickly?
Yeah, all right. Renata and Bogdan share their interim research ideas at a conference. After their presentation, they are proud and happy that a senior scholar praises their work. But a year later, Bogdan shows Renata a paper the senior scholar has just published. It is identical to their ideas, including some quotes they used in the presentation while at the conference. So, is this misconduct, and what type of misconduct this is, and what would you do? So, we are seeing these two people, Renata and Bodan. They shared their research ideas at a certain conference, and their senior praises their work. So after a little while, there's a paper that the senior publishes, and they really find that the work that has been published is identical to that. So actually, this happened to me. Like I had some nice ideas I presented to a senior researcher to, but later on they replicated the similar project, but actually they had rejected my project. They're like, no, no, that is way beyond your scope. So, but I was happy. So in the chat, we are seeing. Yeah. So Baluku is saying that plagiarism, appropriating ideas without credit. Yeah, thank you. It's really plagiarism. And Elunes is also saying that yeah, this is plagiarism. So what would you do? So Tina is saying this is misappropriation of data and information and exploitation and misuse of power, i.e. power imbalance, and as well misconduct, using information fraudulently. Sylvia from Uganda is saying it is stealing and plagiarism. So I would write to the journal to recall it, but also write to the stealers. Okay. Yeah. Yeah. Thank you so much. Tariq is saying report to the publisher. Yeah. So there are also instances where published data is retracted. So research is published for years, and then after like 10 years, if these issues arise, they retract the paper. So the paper is pulled down. even from the most reputable peer-reviewed journals. They usually do that, so you can as well write to the journal editor or to the staff so they can address that issue. Yeah, because of time, I think Petra, we could jump on to the next last question. Yeah, last bit of it. Thank you.
Yeah, so this again is still a misconduct question, but this came in through some of you before this session, and it kind of relates to it. So I think in terms of your questions here, some practical solutions would be helpful, but also maybe trying to talk about how you manage it and what kind of misconduct it is. So one of the questions was, how do we practically resolve authorship dispute cases and protect early career researchers? And I think that's really important because the previous example we just heard relates to that it's really common that plagiarism can happen to anybody. But unfortunately, if you are an early career researcher, you need to share your ideas because you need the feedback and things like that. And you are more at risk of somebody potentially taking advantage of your work or plagiarizing it. But equally, your power is, it's an imbalance. So it's much harder if somebody who's very famous, an international scholar, is presenting your work and you're, an early career researcher or a PhD student. So I think that thinking about that is, how do we protect ourselves from these things would be some good answers. So if you could put some ideas in the chat about how we protect ourselves. And then in terms of authorship, Ssentongo, do you have any tips about how we can resolve authorship dispute cases?
Yeah, well, in resolving authorship dispute cases, so we have it planned. So we have it planned earlier on, whereby these authors declare the declaration forms within the journals when they're publishing. So we have them. We need them to write the exact contributions, what they contributed to the research project, and then also they need also to submit in their declarations and also declare, let's say, also conflict of interest. So we have, I've seen some of the journals having that prompt, like for the authors to do that. So we can plan for and resolve disputes even before they arise. So, but if at all these cases arise, so uh, they can still deal with the journal to make the final resolutions. I think, I don't know what's your contribution to that. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, I agree with that. And I think it's really helpful as early on in a project to describe what everyone's doing and what the expectations are. Because I've certainly found that if you've been helping collect data, for example, but it's not your project, it's not your funding, you're not involved in the writing up, you might well be acknowledged, but you wouldn't necessarily be an author. But if you were expecting to be an author, that's very disappointing and upsetting. So I think it's really helpful to have conversations early on calmly to say, well, what is my role? What are you expecting? What's going to happen as a result of that? What will I get? It's quite a selfish question, but what will I get from doing this work? And then it clears up for you. So if somebody says to you, well, we think you are going to be an author, then what does that mean? How much work? What am I expected to do? So asking early on and revisiting it, because sometimes I've been involved in papers where I was going to be a co-author, but I was busy looking after my family. I just didn't have capacity to help. So I had to say, I'm really sorry. And I ended up as an acknowledgement, which was fine, but I wasn't involved directly. So it was appropriate. I wasn't an author. But I've also had situations where I have contributed a lot and I was surprised that actually my name didn't turn up where it should have done. Thinking about protecting ourselves and also resolving disputes, your other question was junior researchers are frequently pressured to include senior colleagues, supervisors, or department heads as guest or gift authors, even when these individuals have made no substantive contribution to the research. Conversely, the junior researchers who perform the bulk of the data collection and drafting are sometimes unfairly admitted from the author list entirely. So just thinking about the beginning of that, if somebody has not done any work on the paper, but they're a senior and they're given a guest or gift authorship, is that misconduct? You can answer that if you'd like in the chat. But again, maybe we'll just take a minute to quickly pop some ideas in to say, what would you do if you were in that situation? Oh, and there's a good follow-up here is what if three junior researchers conducted the same work in different years or areas? Can the senior person be the main author? Most of the time it's challenging. I will put some resources on the forum about how you establish authorship because it depends on also disciplines about where your name goes on a paper. But I would say it'll be contributions like who owns the grant, who's done the bulk of the writing, that will be the senior, and who came up with the ideas will be the senior authors. It doesn't seem fair, but in a lot of disciplines, if you are collecting the data or running the analysis, unless you also help write up, you might not be an author. And I think that that's very difficult for postgraduates or early career researchers because, of course, we are doing more of that work. So it's why it's really important to check. For me, if I've employed someone just to collect data and that's all they want to do and they don't want to be involved elsewhere, I would probably acknowledge them rather than credit them as an author because they haven't written anything. However, I will always ask them, and if they do want to write something, then we will be writing together actively and they will be named on it. It's a conversation. We were talking earlier about how subjective this is. This is a conversation. What I wouldn't do is let people do all that work for me while I do nothing and then stick my name on it. And I know a lot of academics do that, and I think that's really, really wrong. So I'm aware we're kind of coming to the end. So if you've got any questions, and Tina has said here, it's a lack of clarity that can be handled in agreement before. Completely agree. I don't know what you think, Ssentongo, but whenever I've had I wouldn't call it a dispute, but a disagreement over authorship, by the time we've got to that point, it's upsetting. And I'm usually, sad and angry and feeling let down. That's not a good place to negotiate from. It's not a good place. So asking about this early on is entirely appropriate. And I think that's why using our network to help us even practice how we're going to say it, what we want to ask for, are really good skills. So we've got some extra useful resources here about how to avoid authorship disputes. And we've also got some stuff about policies as well that I think Laura will put into the chat too. This has been a great session today, hasn't it? I've really enjoyed it. Really enjoyed it. And I really appreciate the time you've taken and things. And yes, I think that Tariq is saying here that they're taking advantage. It's not fair. It isn't fair when this stuff happens. And I think something else that you should be alert to, sadly, is if you're collaborating internationally, I think we've all been used to, sadly, experiences where institutions from the global north, particularly Northern Europe and America, will often put their scholars as first authors, even if the bulk of the work was carried out in low middle income countries in the global south, because they can. So I think that's another really important thing about ethics and fairness, is having that conversation when you're building relationships and collaborating together, that part of that collaboration agreement is how are we going to be supported and protected and uplifted because it's our ideas and our energy and our expertise and our communities that's basically making your career here. So actually, in fairness, we are the experts. We go first. Okay, Laura, did you want to pick up on this, or Ssentongo?
Thanks, Petra.
No, yeah, just thankful.
So next week is coming towards the end of the course, so just make sure that you've looked through next week's activities, discussion forums. We'll post the questions from today on the discussion forums with some extra resources. We'll see you again hopefully next Friday. We'll post that time in the WhatsApp chat, so keep an eye on the WhatsApp chat. And very finally, we just wanted to say thank you, and thank you for sharing all of your words for thank you last week. I've put some of these here. So Asante Sana, and do let us know thank you in your languages if we haven't included them already. Petra saying, remember to post in the forums. You can ask and share, and that's great. Thank you ever so much, Petra. Thank you, Ssentongo. Thank you to everybody who joined us today. Thank you for your time. We appreciate it.
Bye, Petra. Enjoy your Fanta. Bye, everyone. Yeah.